guys, this episode we're going to be talking about Hotwire.js and giving you an introduction on how to use it in your Rails applications. Now, Hotwire is a new approach to building reactive applications that are more server-side and HTML over the wire. So we're going to be using this to build a Twitter clone, just like everybody does in their examples. So we can dive in by installing Hotwire for Rails. So first things first is you want to install the Hotwire Rails gem. So you can go into your application and run bundle add Hotwire Rails. This is going to install Turbo Rails and Stimulus Rails. Now, Stimulus Rails installs Stimulus.js in your asset pipeline, so you can write your controllers without Babel and Webpack and all that stuff. And then Turbo Rails is basically the new version of Turbo Links. It actually supports forms and more than just links like hrefs for GET requests. So that's why it's called Turbo instead of just Turbo Links like it used to be. And it's pretty much a replacement for that with more functionality. So you use that in place of Turbo Links. So now that that's installed, we want to run Rails Hotwire install to add all of that installation config to our application. So you'll see that they install your app assets JavaScript, your asset pipeline folder gets your stimulus controllers now, and they configure Redis for you as well for the action cable WebSockets. So let's run our Rails server and take a look at our application. We have a scaffold for tweets. Tweets have a body and they have a likes count and retweets count. Very simple. And whenever we create one of these, they just get created and listed here in this list. So we're not doing anything with that right now. This is just a standard Rails scaffold, and we've got views for that. So we have the form, it submits as a post request and then redirects back to this page and re-renders it. Pretty straightforward. But to use Hotwire, we can start setting up frames and other things in our app. And the first thing that I want to do is go into our model. We can add broadcasting to our model so that when it is created, updated, or destroyed, we can actually send those changes to the browser from the backend. So what we can do here is say after create commit, we can broadcast append to some stream. And if we call our stream tweets, we can have this broadcasted to all users and they will see that new tweet. So let's do prepend to tweets. So it will show up at the very top here. So by saying tweets here, we actually need to create a frame on the page that has that same name. So if we go into our index.html.erb, we can add a turbo frame tag with the name of tweets, and we can wrap our tweets around that. So let's refresh our page. We'll see that there are no differences here visually, but we do have that turbo frame with the ID of tweets. So whatever we pass in is passed to DOM ID, and if it's a regular string, it just adds that as the ID here. Now this almost works, but we have one last thing to do to wire the front end to the back end, and that is adding a turbo stream from tweets tag. What this is going to do is actually set up a line of code in your HTML that says, hey, JavaScript, go and stream from the tweets stream. So it's actually going to tell the action cable channel to stream from that. Then our tweet.rb is going to broadcast to the tweets channel, and it's going to then prepend that to the target of tweets. So now if we jump back to the browser and we refresh the page, what we'll see here is the turbo cable stream source tag on the page. And this is what's going to be sent over action cable, and it will start streaming from the tweets stream. So now if we open up our Rails terminal, we can go into the console and say tweet.create body is hello world, and we'll see that it gets prepended automatically on the page. So this is really awesome and allows us to push updates to the front end, and we can navigate between pages, and that stream tag is going to be monitored and start the stream and close the stream whenever you move away from that on the page. So we can go into our tweet and we can say after update commit, we want to broadcast a replace event, and that is going to the tweet stream. And we can do the same after a destroy, and we will broadcast a remove in that case. So this is going to take the individual tweet and send it across and make the action that this name is for. So replace, prepend, or remove. So now we can go into our terminal and run tweet.last.destroy, and we should see that that is broadcast across in the browser, but it is not. And the reason for that is because this is actually going to look for a target of tweet 6. And you can take a look at the commands that are sent over. They're actually little HTML snippets with the TurboStream action. And you'll see that the target is tweet 6. And if we were to do the same thing for updating, we're not going to get that to work and update these in real time, because we actually need to wrap each one of those tweets in a TurboLinks frame as well. So we have the TurboLinks frame here for all of the tweets, and that's where we know to insert the tweets, but we can also do a TurboLinks frame around the individual tweet itself. So what we'll do is we'll say turbo frame tag for the tweet, and we will wrap that. Now, what we can do here is to use the DOM ID for the tweet, so that when we look at these, we will see the DOM ID of tweet 1, tweet 2, and that's exactly what it was looking for in the terminal when we ran that broadcast. So there are several little things you do have to keep track of, and if you don't use a DOM ID here, what you'll see is the actual tweet memory address and stuff like you do in inspect, and that isn't what you want. So you're going to want to make sure you do a DOM ID there. And that is going to update your page so that now we can call a destroy, and we can do update here and say body is hello go Rails. And that's going to publish those changes and replace the element on the page or destroy it and remove it. And that is really awesome. So now we can pipe these changes anytime something happens in our model layer so that the browser is updated reactively, which is really, really awesome. So the frames so far are pretty useful. We have some basic stuff going on where we have a frame around all of the tweets, we have a frame around every individual tweet, and we can make actions across those. So now let's talk about handling tweets in the form. So we have the form here where we can wrap this with a turbo frame tag as well, and we'll call this tweet form. And this is where frames get to be pretty interesting. So far, we've just used them to update and replace and remove things and take actions against them. It's very familiar. If you've ever used Cable Ready, you can target elements and make the same changes to them. But with our form, this is going to show you something unique, which is that the frames are actually encapsulating like an iframe does. So let's run create tweet here with nothing in there. We have a validation in the model, so let me pull that up real quick. Go into tweet.rb, we have validates body presence is true, and that is going to give you an error message whenever your tweet is created without a body. So we're not getting anything right now, but that frame is actually doing some magic in around this form. So let's take a look at our Rails logs here. Let me pull this out a little bit for you. And what you'll see is when we actually do create tweet here, we're going to get a post tweets, and it does post, but we're going to get a completed OK in 23 milliseconds. But the type of request was a turbo stream request. So Turbo is actually taking your forms and submitting them for you, very similar to how you would do with remote is true in Rails UJS. But Turbo is actually going to do that stuff for you, so you don't want to use Rails UJS to submit forms remote is true anymore. So that is one big difference that you will need to do as you go through here. And we can now go into our controller and take a look at the tweets controller.rb. and address this nothingness happening when we create a tweet. We can click that a million times and it's gonna do the post, but nothing's gonna happen on our front end. So let's walk through what happens when we run create. So normally we have HTML and possibly JSON or JavaScript responses, but Turbo and Hotwire are going to add a format dot turbo stream option here that you can use. And what we want to do is say when the tweet is created but it's not valid, we actually want to replace this form on the page with the form partial and just pump that over and say, hey, replace the form with the one with errors. And it's very easy to do that by using the turbo stream helpers in your controller. So what we'll do is we'll say render turbo stream : and we will say turbo stream dot replace, and you'll notice that this is very similar to the broadcast replace in our model. It's the same concept here. It's generating that tag and sending it over. The broadcast is actually sending that in a background job through your WebSockets, or it can be. But this is actually going to return this as a response to your HTTP request. So you're using AJAX to submit the form, and you're going to respond with some HTML, and that's going to be a TurboStream tag for replacing. So what we'll say is we'll say at tweet, we want to render the partial tweets form, and our locals here is tweet at tweet, and we'll close that. So this is going to render that partial and send a replacement to the browser. But if we do that currently, it doesn't know what to do with that partial. And what we need is an ID on our form tag, and we can say DOM-ID tweet, and this is going to create a DOM ID called new tweet because it's a new tweet. It's not an existing one. We're not editing anything. And that is going to fix our form. So let's refresh and click create tweet. And now we get the errors piped over. And if we open up the Rails logs, you'll see that when we do a post, it's going to get an OK, and it will get that tweet form rendered out there. And so it can do this very quickly. And if you want to take a look at what's happening in your browser, go and submit a request here, and you'll see tweets is made as an AJAX request. You'll see that with the fetch type there, and it makes a post request, and the response is a TurboStream tag. And that says replace the new tweet target with this template. And so it's very straightforward. You're rendering the partial, you're sending a command back, and the command is actually just an HTML tag wrapper around your template. So it's actually really, really simple how this works. It's not using JSON for any of this. It is HTML over the wire. And those commands are interpreted. It sees the replace. It knows what to do in the replace case, and it will go and replace this form with the new one. So we can go into our controller here and take a look at what happens when it is successful. So our code on the back end for the success case is just going to do an HTML or JSON response depending on your request type. And that's kind of the special thing about Turbo events. When you are submitting a frame like this, you are going to see that that actually worked. And we didn't write a TurboStream format for this. It's actually going to use the HTML response by default. And if you have a TurboStream response to take precedence over that, it will. So what happens is when we submit a tweet, it's going to make a AJAX request, and it's going to do the HTML response. So if we look in our logs here, we got a post, and it redirects to /tweets. So what happens there is actually this is done in a frame. So this is processed, the redirect and the frame is processed separately. So it's kind of fascinating because that's going to re-render the page. But actually what happens is our TurboStream from the model broadcasts that new tweet and then prepends it. So if we say prepend here, what we will see happen in our HTML is that it will prepend that to the tweet's turbo frame. And we'll see that that just gets inserted and nothing else happens. And that's because the redirect actually renders the HTML for the whole page again, and then the frame is going to look for a matching frame in that response and then update the form field here. So that's how this gets reset actually. So it's taking that tweet form frame from the render again and replacing it. So it's kind of fascinating. The frames are able to navigate on their own and replace subsections of the content automatically for you. So you can write full views like normal, but it's only going to grab pieces of that as it goes. So let's talk some more about frames. If we were to go into our tweet individually and say link to edit for a tweet, I know it's a crazy idea. You know, God forbid we'd be able to edit our tweets. But if we did this inside of our frame, we can refresh the page and we'll see an edit link. And this doesn't do anything, and that's because it's inside of a turbo frame. It will actually make a request for that. So let's clear this out, and you can see that request to edit, and it will grab the HTML for that without a layout. So it's automatically doing this without layouts for you. And it's going to render the edit.html.erb. Now, because there's no matching frame tag inside of there, it's not going to do anything on our page. It's going to basically get the response of all this HTML and do nothing with it. So in order to make that work, we're going to have a turbo frame tag here with the DOM ID of @tweet, and we're going to wrap our form. So this is going to replace now that tweet itself with the edit view, but only the stuff inside of that turbo frame tag. And you'll notice that our card body disappeared because that's not inside of that partial or this view. And so we would need to add a div class card body in order to make that still match. So let's refresh and click edit now. So this is what you were seeing in DHH's screencast. The turbo frames are making requests, and it's basically treating it like its own little iframe almost. So everything that happens inside of this is actually related to this frame itself and doesn't modify the whole page. So in order for us to add a cancel button inside of here, we would add a link to, and we will say cancel, but instead of linking to, say, the tweet's path, like the root index, we will actually link to the tweet itself. And the reason for that is because the tweet show is going to be the one that's requested, and then this needs to render a turbo frame tag for the tweet with the contents of the tweet. So we can go into this view and we can take all this stuff, replace it with a turbo frame tag that renders @tweet, and this will now be what's requested on a TurboStream link. So now we can click edit and we can click cancel, and it will go and undo what we just did visually. But what it's doing is actually rendering the index, rendering the partial for the tweet for every one of those. Then when you click edit, it renders edit. It takes the frame from the edit and replaces the frame on the page. And then when you click cancel, it actually makes a request to the show of the tweet and then replaces that frame as well. So you'll notice that it does not include the edit back or the notice here. It only includes the turbo frame tag contents. So that's pretty fascinating how this works. So now we can go through here, we can get rid of our contents there, we can click update tweet, our errors happen inline, we can cancel, we can go back, and all of that works as you would expect it to. And you ended up building basically no unique stuff in your code here. We don't really have anything that special. Editing a tweet links back to the tweet like normal. All of these things do the exact thing that you would see them render in the HTML version. So this is really a fascinating approach to see, and it's kind of mind-bending to understand, but if you inspect those requests that happen, just keep in mind that if you're in a frame, it's going to grab the frame from the response on the previous, or on the request. So the request's response needs to have a turbo frame, otherwise it's not going to appear to do anything, and the frame needs to match name-wise. So in our case, we're using the DOM ID for the tweet. So this is pretty fascinating stuff. So let's go and add resource, like, and resource retweet to our tweets and our routes. And then we can go into our controllers and add a likes controller.rb class likes controller. And here it's from application controller. And on create, we want to take and find the tweet. So we'll say before action set tweet. We will grab the tweet as we normally would, def set tweet at tweet equals tweet.find params tweet ID. And here we will say increment the likes count, and let's redirect to at tweet. So this is where the real magic starts to show, because you are going to click on the like button. It is going to make a post request to create. It's going to redirect to the tweet, so it's going to render the tweet HTML version, and that HTML is going to be what Turbo grabs and replaces on the page. This is where things get to be really awesome. So now we go into our tweet, tweet.html.erb, and pull that up here, and we can change our likes from just being text, and we'll say button to like, and we'll say tweet like path for the tweet, and method is post. And we can say likes tweet.likes count inside of that. And then we can do the same thing for retweets when that is ready. So now we see the likes, we can click that and it automatically works. And all of the code for our controller is exactly the same as it would be for an HTTP regular HTML request, which is awesome. This is what is really, really neat. So let's go and add a retweet controller, retweets controller. .rb. We'll paste this in and we'll have our retweets controller, and this will increment the retweets count. So that now needs to just get added here, retweets, and this is the retweets count with the tweet retweet path. And we can delete this button here, and we'll see likes and retweets are incrementing, and that is just basically making a post request, taking the response of that and replacing that tag because it's inside of a turbo frame. So this DOM ID tweet is the one it's looking for in that response, and because we render the tweet show, it knows exactly what to do there. So this is quite cool, and my ordering's out of order, but that tweet goes and drops to the bottom here. So we're able to go and update those as needed. So it's pretty awesome. I love the way that this works. It is quite a bit to wrap your head around because of these frames and the streams and broadcasting, because it doesn't work very straightforward, not quite as straightforward as something like Stimulus Reflex, but it is way more powerful because of that. You can create the stuff that can go and lazy load other pages and whatever, and it can do all that just like regular HTML requests in your app. So there is a lot of cool stuff that this does for you, and it does feel a little bit like magic, as DHH said. So that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will be doing a lot more on Hotwire in the future, but for now, I will talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.